Hello, second graders. Welcome back to our story, I Fall Down by Vicky Cobb. Yesterday, you listened as I read the story out loud to you. Today, we are going to work together to identify the author's purpose for writing this text. Remember that author's purpose is the author's right to tell information, explain, or describe. As you read, look for clues to the author's purpose. Today, we are going to identify 2 clues from our story together. And at the end, you are going to identify the author's purpose. Let's get started. Remember that this is the graphic organizer we have been using this week to identify author's purpose. 2 rectangles up above, pointing down to one longer rectangle at the bottom labeled author's purpose. For this activity, we will be using our composition notebook. So you will need a composition notebook and a pencil. Open to the next clean blank page. You are going to organize your paper just as my example on your screen. At the top of the page, you will write today's date, which is January 8th, 2021, or 1/8/2021. You will label the top of this paper Author's Purpose. Underneath that, you will write the title of this book, I Fall Down. Remember to capitalize the first letter in each word in the title because it's the name of a book. After you've filled in the title, you are then going to draw your boxes for your graphic organizer. You are going to draw 2 rectangles at the top, side by side, and label them with the word clue at the top. Underneath those 2 rectangles, you will draw a longer, skinny one underneath and label that one Author's Purpose. You can make these boxes as big as you need and take up the entire page if you would like. Just make sure you have enough room where you can write a sentence or 2 inside each of the boxes. All right, press pause as you create your page and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay, let's get into the story. For this story, I am going to reread the story and stop and talk to you about the clues we might see as we go. So listen as I read aloud. Know what happens when you spill your milk? It drips down. Throw a ball up into the air. Watch what happens. It goes up for a short time, then falls down. Try tossing other things up in the air. Your mom's keys, a block. When something falls, which way does it fall? Does it ever fall up? So, second graders, the author is telling us that everything falls down. Know what makes things fall? It's a force called gravity. As long as you are on Earth, you can't get away from it. Gravity is always pulling things. Know which way? Down, down, down. You can see how gravity pulls. Take a spoonful of molasses or honey and point the spoon down so that the goo dribbles back into the jar. Watch it drip. The goo stretches and gets longer and longer. It looks like a ribbon streaming into the jar. Gravity pulls the molasses from the spoon back into the jar. All right, second graders, I'm going to stop and think about what I have learned so far and what the author has told me on this page. On this page, the author seems to be explaining what gravity is. She explains that gravity is a force that pulls things down to the earth. So, my first clue is that gravity is a force that pulls things down. That is something that the author is teaching me, the reader. She's trying to explain something to me, and she's trying to teach me about gravity. So go ahead and write down our first sentence in our clue box and press play when you're ready to continue on. Do some things fall faster than others? Try it and see. Hold a penny and a key in one hand. Open your hand so they both start falling at the same time. Listen and watch as they hit the floor. Did either the penny or the key win the race? Or was it a tie? Things fall so fast, it's hard to tell if there is a winner or a loser. Have lots of dropping races, but no matter whether the objects are big or small, it seems that it's always a tie. The only time you have a clear loser is when you drop something that the wind could easily blow away, such as a feather or a tissue. You can see air fighting gravity only with very light objects. If there were no air, you would find that gravity pulls everything at the same speed. Astronauts proved this on the moon, where there is no air. Every dropping race was a tie. Amazing, but true. All right, second graders, here again, I'm going to stop and think about what I've read. I'm going to reread this first sentence on this page to learn more about what the author is talking about air and gravity. If there were no air, you would find that gravity pulls everything at the same speed. Okay, so on the previous page, when they were talking about the dropping races, they said that sometimes feathers or tissues get caught up in the air and they fall slower than other objects. So the author is telling us that on the moon, where there's no air, everything falls at the same speed. So we've learned that the force called gravity that always pulls things down, that sometimes on the moon, everything falls at the same speed because there is no air. This is another clue about the author's purpose. We will add this information to the second clue box on our chart. Gravity pulls everything on the moon at the same speed because there's no air on the moon, unlike the Earth, where we have air. So not everything falls at the same speed. I will zoom in on this clue so you can read it a little bit easier to copy it down. Here is the clue a little bit closer up. I will read it one more time for you. Gravity pulls everything on the moon at the same speed because there's no air on the moon. Press pause and then play again when you're ready to move on. Does everything land with the same force, or do some things hit harder than others? Here's a way to find out. Have someone drop a dry sponge onto your hand from about a foot above. Next, try a small bar of soap. Which hits your hand harder, the sponge or the soap? Try dropping lots of things into your hand. Soon you will discover that some things hit harder than others. Now hold the bar of soap in one hand and the sponge in another. Which is heavier, the sponge or the soap? Move your hands up and down to feel the difference. Your hands stop the sponge and the soap from falling to the ground. But you can still feel gravity's pull on the soap and sponge when you hold them in your hands. This pull is called weight. Stop and check. Reread. What is weight? Reread to check your understanding. Weight is the pull of gravity that tells how heavy something is. So the pull is called weight. The pull of the gravity of the object is called weight. Second graders, I'm noticing that these past few pages have still been about gravity. We're still learning all about gravity. We've learned that weight is gravity's pull. So keep this in mind as we're thinking about the author's purpose. You can see if one object is heavier than another without letting either of them fall. Here's how. Get 2 rubber bands the same size. Tie one of your shoes to one rubber band. Tie one of your parents' shoes to the other rubber band. Lift both shoes on the rubber bands. Which rubber band stretches more? The heavier shoe stretches the rubber band more. Each rubber band acts like a scale to measure weight. And remember, weight is the pull of gravity. And that brings us to the end of our story. So now let's look back at the 2 clues we have found. What are both clues mostly about? Do you see a word or an idea repeated in both clues? That's right. Both clues are about gravity. The first clue explains what gravity is. It's a force that pulls things down. And the second clue tells us how gravity pulls things down at the same speed. So if both of our clues are about gravity, what do you think the author was wanting to teach the reader from the story? What do you think was the author's purpose? The author's purpose of this story was to explain what? The author explains blank. What was it that the author was trying to explain? What is our word that we learned mostly about in this story? When you know, go ahead and complete that sentence in your author's purpose box. The author explains blank. If the author's purpose was to explain something, what did the author explain to us? Once you have written your final sentence for the author's purpose, you will have completed this assignment. Thanks so much for working with me, second graders, and rereading this story about gravity. Have an awesome afternoon.